Welcome to another deep dive, and this time we're stepping into the world of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, the game's afoot.
Yeah, we've got a whole stack of Sherlock Holmes stories here, and we're going to be like Dr. Watson right next to the famous detective. We're going to see how he uses his incredible powers of observation and deduction.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think we often think of Sherlock Holmes as almost superhuman.
Yeah.
But, when you look at these stories, you get a glimpse into his method. It's like he breaks down these complex problems into these solvable pieces. So it's really a masterclass in critical thinking.
Absolutely.
And it's something you can actually take away and apply to your own life.
Yeah, and so speaking of observation, one of the most famous things about Sherlock Holmes is, he looks at somebody and he can tell, so much about their life. Like, for example, there's a story where he looks at Watson and he can tell that Watson's been out walking in the rain and that his servant girl is clumsy. I mean, how does he even get that?
Well, he's really good at noticing those little details.
Yeah.
Like he sees mud stains on Watson's trousers from his recent country walk.
Ah.
And, since it had been raining, he could deduce that, Watson had been caught out in a downpour.
Yeah.
And then he sees these scorch marks on Watson's shirt. And that, of course, is a dead giveaway that he's got a servant who, is a little bit too friendly with a hot iron.
Mm-hmm.
So when he combines all those little observations with his knowledge of everyday patterns, he can basically, boom, deduction made.
It's like connecting the dots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, he avoids jumping to conclusions, right?
Yeah.
He gathers enough data before even trying to theorize.
Uh-huh.
Because as he famously said in Scandal in Bohemia, that one with the note written on the expensive paper.
Oh, yeah, A Scandal in Bohemia. Yeah, vaguely remember that one.
He points out that, if you start theorizing too early, that you start twisting facts to fit your theory instead of, letting the facts lead you to the right conclusion. So it's really important, not just for detectives, but for all of us. We do this all the time. We jump to conclusions without having all the facts.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really crucial lesson there.
Now, speaking of A Scandal in Bohemia, that's the one that features Irene Adler, right?
Yes.
And she's kind of a big deal in the Sherlock Holmes world, I think.
She is.
Yeah.
She's one of the very few people who's ever outsmarted him.
Ah.
Which is why, this is such a captivating story. And it all starts with the King of Bohemia barging into, 221B Baker Street.
Yeah.
And you can just picture this, a towering figure dressed in these opulent clothes, but wearing a mask to hide his identity.
Dramatic.
Right.
What's his problem?
So his attire, screams wealth and power,
Mm-hmm.
but the mask and his, anxious demeanor really hints at vulnerability.
Right.
So he needs Holmes's help,
Yeah.
and he needs it desperately.
So what was he so desperate about?
Well, his problem was an opera singer named Irene Adler. She possessed a photograph that could completely jeopardize his upcoming marriage.
Ooh, royal scandal. What was in the picture?
Well, the story never explicitly states what exactly was in the photograph, but,
Yeah.
It's heavily implied that it was something, quite compromising, something that could lead to, a huge scandal and maybe even threaten the king's engagement.
Right.
So quite serious stuff.
Yeah. So what did Holmes do?
Well, Holmes, being Holmes, devises this clever plan to retrieve the photograph. He uses disguises, he stages a fake fire, and he thinks he's completely outsmarted Irene.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is the brilliant part, Irene sees right through his plan.
Oh.
And she escapes with the photograph and even leaves Holmes this letter,
Really?
showing him respect and even, a bit of admiration.
So even Sherlock can be outsmarted.
Exactly.
Kind of a nice thought. I mean,
Yeah.
that even the greatest minds can be humbled, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely. I think, it reveals something about both Irene and Holmes, right?
Right.
Irene was obviously incredibly intelligent and resourceful.
Yeah.
To be able to anticipate Holmes's moves.
Yeah.
That's no easy feat. And then Holmes, he took the experience as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, it's like even the greatest minds can always learn and grow.
Exactly.
Now, we've got a case here that I think really highlights how seemingly trivial details can just crack a case wide open, and that is the case of the Red-Headed League.
Ah, yes. This one involves a pawnbroker named Jabez Wilson, a man blessed with exceptionally red hair.
Okay.
And he answers this really bizarre advertisement, offering a high-paying job,
Okay.
but only for red-headed men.
Wait, what? A job just for redheads? What's the catch?
Well, that's exactly what intrigued Holmes.
Yeah.
Like the absurdity of the situation hinted that there was something far more complex going on.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, Wilson gets the job, right? And it consists of just copying the Encyclopedia Britannica for hours every day.
Okay.
And then suddenly the lead disappears, leaving Wilson totally confused and out of this peculiar job.
That's so weird.
Okay.
Did Holmes figure it out?
Of course. Holmes, being Holmes, examines the street where the league was located.
Yeah.
And he noticed something interesting about, well, Wilson's assistant?
What could be interesting about the assistant?
His trousers.
His trousers.
The assistant's trousers had like worn and wrinkled knees,
Okay.
suggesting that he spent a lot of time kneeling, possibly digging.
Ah.
So this detail, combined with his observations of the street itself, led him to a shocking realization.
So the red hair and the encyclopedia and the digging, it all connects.
It does. The whole red-headed league was an elaborate distraction, right?
Yeah.
Designed to keep Wilson away from his pawn shop, while his assistant, who's actually a notorious criminal, was busy digging a tunnel to rob a bank next door.
Wow. That is crazy. So I guess the takeaway here is that even the smallest detail can be important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a reminder to pay attention to everything, even things that seem insignificant. Because sometimes, those little details can make all the difference.
Yeah.
In cracking the case wide open, sometimes, those tiny little details can actually lead you down a path of misdirection. Just like in the Boscombe Valley mystery. This time, we have a young man named James McCarthy accused of murdering his father.
Yeah.
At the Boscombe pool.
Oh, I remember this one. Yeah, this is like a classic whodunit.
Exactly.
Didn't the father, cry out before he was shot? So it seems like pretty straightforward.
Well, that's what Lestrade thought, right? The Scotland Yard detective. But, when you actually look at the evidence, it's way more conflicting than it seemed.
Okay.
Like, the father's dying words mentioned a rat.
Right.
Which didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Oh, no.
And then there was this piece of gray cloth.
Yeah.
That vanished from the crime scene.
Okay, yeah. It is getting a little murky.
Right.
I bet Holmes looked beyond the obvious.
Exactly. He considers, the type of weapon used, the footprints at the scene, and deduces that the murderer was left-handed and had a game leg.
Yeah.
And then, he connects the dots. Remember, his knowledge of the Australian gold mines?
Oh, yeah. Holmes always seemed to know, a little bit of something about everything.
Right. It's that wide range of knowledge that makes him such a brilliant detective. So he links, this game leg to this specific injury that's common among miners in Australia. And guess what? That seemingly random fact leads him straight to the real killer.
Oh, so it wasn't the son.
It wasn't.
So I guess that's a good reminder that sometimes the most obvious suspect is actually innocent.
Exactly. Jumping to conclusions can be really dangerous. And I think this case underscores the importance of objectivity, right?
Yeah.
You have to consider all perspectives and not let your emotions cloud your judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk about a case that always sends chills down my spine. The 5 orange pips. Didn't somebody get a really creepy package in this one?
Yes. John Openshaw, this young man, comes to Holmes after receiving this mysterious letter containing, you guessed it, 5 orange pips.
Right.
But what makes this case so unsettling, really, is the context.
Yeah.
Openshaw's father and uncle both died under, these mysterious circumstances after receiving similar letters.
So it's like this history of tragedy.
Exactly.
And this feeling of impending doom.
Yeah.
Like something terrible is about to happen.
And Openshaw is living in fear, right?
Yeah.
He feels like he's up against this unknown, unstoppable force. And even Holmes is, shaken by the gravity of the situation.
Really?
Especially after he finds, this connection between the Orange Pips and the Ku Klux Klan and Openshaw's father's papers.
The KKK. Wow, this case just got dark.
Yeah.
So what did Holmes do?
Well, recognizing the urgency of the situation, Holmes tries desperately to save Openshaw, right? He traces the letter to a ship called the Lone Star.
Okay.
But despite his best efforts, tragedy strikes. Openshaw is found dead.
Oh.
And the Lone Star sinks at sea, suggesting that the forces at play here are as ruthless as they are mysterious.
Yeah. I guess, it's a reminder that sometimes even Sherlock Holmes can't win, right? And that sometimes evil prevails, and even the best of us can't always prevent it.
Yeah, I think even in cases like this, though, Holmes's approach provides some valuable lessons, right? Like his unwavering focus, his determination to uncover the truth, even in the face of danger. You know, that's something we can all learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's lighten the mood a little bit.
Sure.
How about a case that exposes, like, the deceptive nature of appearances?
Okay.
I think the man with the twisted lip fits the bill.
Yes. This one starts with Watson stumbling upon his acquaintance, Isa Whitney,
Yeah,
in an opium den of all places.
right.
And the mystery revolves around the disappearance of Neville St. Clair.
Yeah, whose wife claimed to have seen him at the window of that same opium den.
Right. But there's no trace of him. And his coat is found on the riverbank, pockets full of coins.
Yeah, it seemed impossible.
It did. It was a scenario that really challenged conventional thinking.
Hmm.
And it forced Holmes to consider possibilities that seemed utterly absurd at first glance.
Yeah.
So eventually, the investigation leads to the discovery of this beggar named Hugh Boone,
Right,
this man with a twisted lip, who matches the description of the person at the window.
right. But how does a beggar fit into the disappearance of, a respectable man?
Well, hold on to your hat, because this is where it gets really surprising. Boone was Neville St. Clair in disguise.
What?
He had chosen a life of begging,
Really?
finding it surprisingly lucrative.
So he just faked his own disappearance to make money as a beggar.
He did.
That's pretty audacious.
It is. And I think this case, it really highlights how deceptive appearances can be. We make judgments based on what we see, but the truth can be hidden beneath the surface.
Yeah, don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also shines a light on the unexpected lengths people will go to for financial gain.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of judging a book by its cover, a case of identity really exposes how, manipulation can happen even within families, right?
Yes. This story really delves into the subtle cruelty of deceit,
Yeah.
and particularly within a family. It features Miss Mary Sutherland,
Okay.
a young woman with a comfortable income,
Okay.
who falls victim to this peculiar deception,
Okay.
orchestrated by her stepfather.
Oh, so what did he do? Like force her to give him her money or something?
Well, it was more insidious than that.
Okay.
So, Mr. Windibank, he's the stepfather, fearing that he'd lose access to Mary's income if she married.
Right.
He creates this fictional character named Hosmer Angel.
Wait, he invented a fake suitor for his stepdaughter?
He did.
What? Why?
To manipulate her, of course.
What?
So this fictional Hosmer, he woos Mary
Right.
and then abruptly vanishes, ensuring that she remains single and financially dependent on her stepfather.
Wow.
He even uses a typewriter for Hosmer's letters,
Yeah.
to avoid his handwriting being recognized.
That is cold. Talk about taking advantage of someone's trust.
Yeah, yes. But, I think it also showcases Holmes's evolving understanding of the world, right?
Huh.
He recognized the typewriter, as this new tool, not just for communication,
Yeah.
but also for deception.
Uh-huh.
So he was adapting his methods to kind of keep up with the times, always one step ahead.
Yeah. So what happened to the stepfather? Did he face any consequences?
It's interesting. Holmes chooses not to involve the police in this case.
What?
Yeah. He confronts Windibank,
Yeah.
exposes his scheme to Mary,
Uh-huh.
but leaves it at that,
Really? Why? I mean, wouldn't that be a crime?
probably.
Yeah.
But I think Holmes recognized that sometimes the best form of justice is simply revealing the truth.
Yeah.
And he saw that, legal action might actually cause Mary more pain and upheaval, So it's a reminder that justice can actually take many forms.
Yeah. So he was thinking about the bigger picture, the
Exactly.
human cost.
Exactly.
That's pretty insightful. Now let's get back to a good old-fashioned theft.
Okay.
I love how in The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, Holmes is able to, find a precious gem through a Christmas goose.
Ah, yes. This case starts with the theft of a precious gem, from the Countess of Morcar.
Okay.
And a plumber named John Horner is the prime suspect.
Mm-hmm.
But the gem, the blue carbuncle, is nowhere to be found.
Right. And then a goose enters the picture.
A goose does enter the picture.
Yeah.
And this seemingly insignificant goose,
Yeah.
lost amidst this street scuffle,
Uh-huh.
becomes a vital clue for Holmes.
Okay, but how does a goose lead to a stolen gem?
Well, it all starts with this commissionaire bringing Holmes a goose in a battered hat,
Okay.
found after a fight. And Holmes, from a mere description of the hat's owner, Mr. Henry Baker, he identifies him,
Yeah.
places an ad for its return.
So I guess a hat can tell you a lot about a person to a keen observer like Holmes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Baker arrives to claim his hat, explaining that he'd lost the goose.
Yeah.
Holmes, ever the gentleman, offers a replacement goose.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the twist. While preparing the original goose for dinner, Peterson's wife discovers the missing blue carbuncle inside.
What? It was hidden in the goose.
It was.
That is random.
It's this random detail that sets Holmes off on this whirlwind investigation. Right?
Yeah.
He follows the goose's trail,
Right.
uncovering this whole network of transactions, from baker to a poultry dealer to this salesman at Covent Garden. And guess what? The trail leads to a hotel attendant named James Ryder, the true thief who hid the gem in the goose.
So the goose wasn't random at all.
It wasn't. It was a crucial link
Yeah.
in this chain of events.
And speaking of unexpected places, the next story takes us to a rather creepy location. The Adventure of the Speckled Band.
I think this one takes place in a really creepy, dilapidated manor house, right?
It is. And this time we delve into the world of, Gothic suspense.
Oh, yeah.
So a young woman, Helen Stoner, approaches Holmes, fearing for her life after the mysterious death of her sister
Okay.
in their eerie manor house.
Ooh, I love a good Gothic mystery.
Right. So her sister died just weeks before her own wedding, uttering these cryptic words, the speckled band, in her final moments. And Helen reveals that she's been hearing, these strange whistles and metallic sounds coming from her stepfather's room.
Sounds suspicious. What did Holmes think about all of that?
Well, he suspected foul play right away.
Yeah.
The locked bedroom, the dummy bell pull, the bolted shutters, and a ventilator connecting to the stepfather's room. All these things pointed to a really sinister scheme.
Right.
And when Holmes and Watson arrive at Stoke Moran, the manor house, the atmosphere is heavy with dread. So what did Holmes find?
He observed that Helen's bed was clamped to the floor, preventing it from being moved.
Oh.
And in the stepfather's room, he found a saucer of milk and a dog leash with a loop tied at the end.
Wait, a saucer of milk and a dog leash. How does that connect to murder?
Well, that's the brilliance of Holmes.
Yeah.
So that night, they're waiting in Helen's room, right? And they hear this low whistle and a metallic clinking.
Okay.
Holmes, sensing danger, strikes a match and shouts.
And
what they see is horrifying.
Don't leave me hanging. What was it?
Dr. Roylott, the stepfather, was dead.
Oh!
With this venomous swamp adder, the sepulchred band, coiled around his head.
Oh my God.
So he had trained the snake to crawl through the ventilator and bite his stepdaughter in her bed. Right? But because of Holmes's intervention, the snake turned on its master instead.
That's so creepy. It shows that sometimes, the truth really is stranger than fiction. And that even seemingly supernatural events actually have a logical explanation.
Exactly. And I think the speckled band really demonstrates Holmes's courage and his ability to see through this, veil of fear and superstition to uncover the truth.
Yeah. Now let's dive into The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb.
Yeah.
I think this one features, a pretty unique injury.
It does. This story introduces us to Mr. Victor Hatherley.
Yeah.
A hydraulic engineer who approaches Holmes after this terrifying encounter that left him, physically and emotionally scarred, missing a thumb.
Ouch! How do you lose his thumb?
So he was summoned to this remote house for a late-night job involving a hydraulic press.
Okay.
And the job seemed legit at first. But Hatherley soon discovers that something sinister is afoot.
Okay. What tipped him off?
Well, he noticed his employer, this Colonel Lysander Stark, this really eccentric character, was actually using the press for counterfeiting coins.
Wow.
Yeah.
Counterfeiting. Okay.
So when Hatherley stumbles upon their operation, they try to kill him.
What? So counterfeiting and attempted murder.
Right.
That escalated quickly.
It did. So Hatherley barely escapes, losing his thumb in the process.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So Holmes, of course, sees the connection between the injury and the crime.
Yeah.
He uses Hatherley's account and, the missing thumb as his starting point.
Yeah.
And he deduces that Stark is actually part of this larger criminal network involved in counterfeiting.
So even a missing thumb can be a vital clue.
It can be.
It's a reminder that, evidence can really come in the most unexpected forms.
Absolutely. And sometimes the most unassuming people can actually find themselves caught up in these dangerous situations.
Yeah.
Just like the young governess in The Adventure of the Copper Beaches.
Oh, yeah. This is the one where Violet Hunter, right?
Yes.
She's offered a job, and it's got, really weird requirements.
It's a very strange job.
But, what kind of stuff?
So they want her to cut off her long hair,
Okay.
and wear specific dresses that are chosen by them. And, the whole thing seems really unsettling.
Yeah.
But the salary is really tempting.
Right.
So she's torn.
It's like a horror movie setup.
Right.
Mm.
So she comes to Holmes for advice.
Yeah, what did he say?
He advises her to proceed with caution, right?
Yeah.
Sensing that something's not quite right. And of course, he was right.
Yeah.
So Violet accepts the position
Yeah.
and goes to Copper Beeches, this large, isolated house.
Okay.
And her employer, Mr. Rucastle, turns out to be very controlling and secretive.
Okay.
And his wife is strangely subdued.
So creepy.
Right. And she's tasked with caring for this young child who's, like, overly attached to her.
Okay.
And she's forbidden from entering certain parts of the house. Plus, she notices this strange man lurking outside, seemingly watching her.
I'm getting goosebumps.
Right.
Yeah.
And the situation takes an even darker turn when Violet discovers this locked room in the attic. Inside, she finds a collection of this beautiful long hair that perfectly matches her own.
Oh, that's a red flag.
It is.
Yeah. Did Holmes come to the rescue?
He did.
Okay, good.
Alerted to Violet's suspicions, Holmes and Watson traveled to Copper Beeches to investigate, and they uncovered the truth. The locked room held Rucastle's daughter, Alice,
Okay.
who was imprisoned by her father to prevent her from marrying this man he disapproved of.
Oh, so that creepy guy outside was probably the fiancé.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he thought Violet was Alice because of, the similar looks and the forced haircut.
Yeah.
So Holmes, of course, confronts Rucastle, frees Alice, exposes his whole scheme.
So, that whole thing is a reminder that sometimes beautiful homes and charming appearances can hide really horrific secrets.
Yeah.
So you never know. You always have to be a little bit vigilant.
Yeah,
Even when things seem perfectly normal on the surface.
absolutely.
Now, shifting gears a bit, how about that case with the severed ears?
The Adventure of the Cardboard Box.
Yes, the cardboard box.
Yeah. This story, while it's not as famous as some of Holmes's other cases, it offers this really fascinating glimpse into his ability to understand, human jealousy and the depths of human cruelty.
Yeah, and I remember reading about this one. I think somebody got a pretty disturbing package.
They did.
Yeah.
Miss Susan Cushing, this quiet woman living in Croydon, receives a cardboard box containing 2 severed human ears.
Oh my gosh. That's horrific. Who would do such a thing?
Well, Holmes, he was unfazed by the gruesome nature of the evidence and quickly determines that the ears belonged to a man and a woman and were severed, after death.
Okay.
So, he turns his attention to this Cushing's past relationships, right?
Yeah.
Focusing on a past romance with 2 brothers,
Okay.
one of whom was known to be abusive.
So the motive was revenge.
Exactly. Holmes suspected that the abusive brother, driven by jealousy and rage, had murdered his own brother and his brother's wife,
Oh.
and then sent the ears to Miss Cushing as this really twisted act of revenge.
That's just chilling. It's a reminder that, even seemingly ordinary people are capable of just horrific acts.
Yes, and it showcases Holmes's ability to, remain objective, even when faced with the most disturbing evidence. He doesn't let, the gruesome nature of the crime distract him from his pursuit of the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, the truth involves love and loss and a long-lost love that returns, like in The Adventure of the Crooked Man, right?
Yes.
What was that one about again?
This case takes us to Aldershot, where Colonel James Barclay is found dead in his home,
Okay.
and his wife, Nancy, is the immediate suspect.
Okay, but wasn't there something unusual about his death?
There was.
I vaguely remember something about a portrait.
You're right. The colonel was found clutching a portrait of his wife,
Yeah.
but with this look of sheer horror on his face,
Okay.
and there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry.
So how did he die? Frightened to death by his own wife's portrait.
Not quite. Holmes delves into the colonel's past and uncovers a secret marriage
Okay.
from many years ago.
Okay.
His first wife, Leonora, was presumed dead after a fire,
Mm-hmm.
but Holmes suspected that she might still be alive.
Okay, so the first wife comes back from the dead. That's a twist.
It is. Holmes' investigation leads him to a traveling circus, where he meets this performer known as the Crooked Man.
Okay.
And this man turns out to be Leonora's deformed brother.
Oh, wow. So what happened to Leonora? Was she involved in the colonel's death?
Well, Leonora had survived the fire,
Okay.
but she was disfigured,
Okay.
and she chose to live in hiding, fearing that her husband would be repulsed by her appearance.
Oh.
So on the night of his death, she and her brother visit the colonel. He recognizes his long-lost love and is so shocked, it causes a fatal heart attack.
Wow, talk about a tragic reunion. It's a reminder that sometimes the past can come back to haunt us in really unexpected ways.
Absolutely. And it highlights Holmes's ability to, see beyond the obvious.
Yeah.
And understand these complex emotions
Right.
that drive human behavior.
Speaking of complex emotions, how about a case that's all about speed, deception, and the high stakes of horse racing? Silver Blaze. This one's a classic.
It is. Silver Blaze, a champion racehorse, vanishes from his stable
Okay.
just days before a big race.
Uh-huh.
And his trainer, John Straker, is found dead on the moor.
Okay, so we've got a missing horse and a dead trainer. Definitely sounds like foul play.
Right. But Holmes, as always, looks beyond the surface.
Yeah.
He notices this strange dog leash near the body
Oh, okay.
and a curious lameness in one of the stable dogs.
Oh.
He also observed that Silver Blaze's distinctive white markings have been disguised with paint.
Hold on, paint it over. Why would somebody do that?
That's exactly what intrigued Holmes.
Yeah.
So through careful deduction, and some clever experiments, he uncovers the truth.
Okay.
Straker was trying to injure Silver Blaze
What?
to throw the race,
Really?
but was accidentally killed by the horse in the process.
So it was an accident, not murder. What about the horse, though? Where did he go?
Well, Silver Blaze, frightened and disoriented, wandered off
Okay.
and was taken in by a farmer.
Okay.
And the farmer, unaware of the horse's identity, he painted over the markings just to avoid attracting attention.
Right, yeah. So did Holmes find the horse in time for the big race?
Of course.
Okay, good.
He understands the situation
Yeah.
and returns Silver Blaze to his owner just in time for the race,
Okay.
which the horse wins handily.
Classic Holmesian ending.
Right.
Justice prevails.
Yeah.
The innocent are protected.
Uh-huh.
The truth comes out.
That's how it always goes. But let's switch gears now
Okay.
and talk about a case that delves into the world of international espionage.
Ooh.
The Adventure of the Naval Treaty.
Okay.
So this one involves, stolen documents,
Hmm.
national secrets. Percy Phelps, a young clerk at the Foreign Office, comes to Holmes in a panic.
What happened?
A crucial naval treaty was stolen
Oh, wow.
from Phelps's office. And this theft could spark, a major international crisis.
That's high stakes.
Right.
So what did Holmes do?
Well, he examines the scene meticulously,
Yeah.
finding a broken hinge on the door
Uh-huh.
and signs of a struggle. He also notices an unusual cigarette ash,
Okay.
one that didn't match any of the usual suspects.
Right.
So through a series of deductions and this really clever trap, he exposes the culprit, Joseph Harrison, a former Foreign Office employee
Ah.
with a grudge against the government.
So it was an inside job fueled by revenge.
Exactly.
Wow.
Harrison, desperate for money, planned to sell the treaty to a foreign agent.
Oh, wow.
Holmes, of course, intervenes, recovering the document, and preventing this potential international incident.
That was a close one. It's a reminder that even those we trust can betray us.
Right.
And sometimes the motives behind a crime are way more personal than political.
Exactly. Now, let's switch gears to a case that's a bit more personal.
Okay.
I'm thinking of The Adventure of the Solitary Cyclist.
Oh, yeah. This is the one with Violet Smith, right?
Yes.
And she kept seeing this mysterious cyclist,
Right.
like following her on her rides. It sounds like a little nightmarish.
It does. And Violet was terrified.
Yeah.
So, Holmes listens to her story,
Uh-huh.
and he learns that she had recently inherited a large sum of money.
Ah, so money's involved. That usually means trouble.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So Holmes suspected that someone might be targeting Violet for her inheritance,
Yeah.
and that the cyclist was playing a part in their scheme.
Okay, so who was this creepy cyclist? What did they want with Violet?
Well, Holmes and Watson travel to the area
Yeah.
and uncover this really sinister plot
Okay.
involving a family named the Carruthers who lived nearby.
Okay.
This family had a reputation for violence and deceit.
Okay.
And guess what? They were trying to marry Violet off to their son
Wait, a forced marriage? Why?
because their son was secretly already married,
Oh.
and they wanted Violet's inheritance. So, the cyclist was an accomplice, hired to keep an eye on Violet and make sure she didn't uncover the truth before the wedding.
So they were using the cyclist to, like, intimidate her and isolate her.
Exactly.
That's awful.
Yeah, it was a despicable plan.
Yeah.
But Holmes, as always, saw through their deception.
Good.
He exposed the truth,
Uh-huh.
freed Violet from their clutches, and ensured that the Carruthers faced justice.
Good. Sometimes even like the simplest cases, like a stalking incident, can unravel into something far more complex and sinister.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder to never dismiss someone's fears,
Yeah.
especially when there might be more to the story than meets the eye.
Exactly. Now, how about we delve into a case that blends the eerie with the all-too-human desire for revenge? The Adventure of the Dancing Men.
Oh, that's the one with the stick figures. Those drawings were creepy.
They are quite unsettling. So the story features Mr. Hilton Cubitt,
Oh, okay.
this country squire who comes to Holmes with a problem. These peculiar stick figure drawings are appearing
Yeah.
around his home.
Right. And his wife, Elsie, is terrified by them.
Okay, why was she so scared? Did she know what they meant?
She did. But she refused to explain their meaning,
Okay.
claiming that it was connected to, like, this dark secret
Okay.
from her past.
Mm-hmm.
So Holmes, ever intrigued by a good cipher, right? This host speaker,
Yeah.
begins to decode the drawings,
Okay.
suspecting that they were a form of secret communication.
So what did he find out?
Well, the drawings were actually a cipher used by a criminal gang from Elsie's hometown in America.
Ah.
And the messages were threatening, demanding Elsie return to her old life.
So Elsie was involved with criminals.
Exactly.
No wonder she was scared.
Right. So she was trying to escape her past,
Yeah.
but it was catching up with her.
Yeah.
So Holmes, realizing the danger, goes to protect Elsie.
Okay.
But tragedy strikes.
What happened?
A final message arrived, right?
Uh-huh.
A dancing man with outstretched arms, a sign of impending doom.
And Elsie's former lover, this ruthless criminal named Abe Slaney, arrives and shoots Hilton.
Oh, no. Did Elsie survive?
She did, but in a desperate attempt to save her husband, she shoots and kills Slaney.
What a tragic ending.
It is.
So those dancing men weren't just some childish prank. They were like a deadly message.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that the past can have this really powerful grip on the present. And sometimes, escaping, it's just impossible.
Yes. And I think the case also underscores the power of communication, even in its most cryptic forms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a simple stick figure, when it's imbued with meaning, can become like a tool of terror.
Yeah, that's true. Now, switching gears, let's talk about a case that takes place in a pretty prestigious setting, the Adventure of the Priory School. I think this one involves a missing child.
It did. This story takes us to a boarding school
Okay.
where the son of a wealthy duke is kidnapped.
Right.
And at the same time, the headmaster's bicycle is stolen.
A kidnapping and a bicycle theft. Okay, I don't really see the connection.
Right. It seems like they're totally unrelated events. But Holmes suspected otherwise.
Okay.
So he examines the scene,
Yeah.
noting tire tracks, footprints that suggest, it was a planned abduction.
Uh-huh.
He also uncovers this secret love affair between a German teacher and the Duke's former housekeeper.
Oh, okay, so there's a romantic angle. But why kidnap the boy?
Well, it turns out that the boy's father, Lord Saltire,
Okay.
had orchestrated the whole scheme.
What?
He was seeking revenge on the Duke for ruining his life years ago,
Okay.
and he planned to flee with his son to America,
Wow.
using the stolen bicycle as his getaway vehicle.
So it was like a revenge plot disguised as a kidnapping.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So Holmes, of course, unravels the truth, reunites the boy with his father, and exposes Lord Saltire's plan.
That's crazy. I guess it's a reminder that even in seemingly respectable institutions,
Yeah.
secrets and personal vendettas can fuel criminal acts.
They can.
Mhm.
Now let's talk about a case that takes us back to Oxford, the Adventure of the Three Students.
Okay, didn't somebody tamper with exam papers in this one?
They did. So this case centers on a tutor, Mr. Soames,
Okay.
who discovers that the proofs for this important exam have been tampered with.
Okay.
And he suspects one of his three students.
Oh, a classic academic scandal. I bet the pressure to succeed just led someone astray.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Holmes examines the scene, noting a muddy footprint
Uh-huh.
and a clay smudge on a chair.
Okay.
And through his deductions, he pinpoints the culprit, Miles McLaren,
Okay.
this seemingly harmless but financially struggling student.
Right.
So McLaren, desperate to pass the exam, had tried to cheat but was interrupted.
Okay. Did Holmes turn him in?
He didn't. He understood McLaren's desperation and chose to give him a second chance.
Oh.
He allows McLaren to leave Oxford quietly, sparing him public humiliation and allowing him to start over.
That's really kind of him. It shows that, Holmes wasn't always about like strict justice, right? Sometimes compassion was the better course of action.
Exactly. I think this case really highlights the pressures faced by students.
Mm.
And it reminds us that everyone makes mistakes, especially when they feel desperate.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's move on to a case that involves political intrigue and the threat of like international conflict.
Okay.
The Adventure of the Second Stain. This one sounds pretty intense.
It is. The story kicks off with Lord Bellinger,
Okay.
the Prime Minister's secretary, arriving at Baker Street in a panic.
Oh, no.
A vital document has been stolen, right?
Okay.
A letter that could actually spark a war.
Oh, wow.
So, the threat of war loomed if the letter's contents fell into the wrong hands.
Right, so what did Holmes do?
Well, he immediately suspects Lady Hilda Trelawney Hope,
Okay.
this beautiful and mysterious woman
Right.
with these rumored foreign connections.
Classic femme fatale. I bet she was the culprit.
Not so fast.
Okay.
It's a Sherlock Holmes story, after all. There's
Yeah.
always a twist. So it turns out that Lady Hilda's husband, driven by jealousy and suspicion of her infidelity, had stolen the letter himself
What?
and then went into hiding,
Oh, wow.
hoping to frame his wife.
Wow, talk about a double betrayal. So what did Holmes do?
Well, he, of course, sees through the deception.
Yeah.
He recovers the letter,
Uh-huh.
exposes the truth,
Okay.
saves Lady Hilda's reputation,
Good.
and averts this potential war.
Wow, that was a close one. It's a reminder that, even in the highest levels of government,
Yeah,
personal motives and jealousies can have like really far-reaching consequences.
absolutely.
Now, how about a case that takes us to like a secluded country house filled with secrets and a family legacy of violence? I'm thinking of The Adventure of Wisteria Lodge.
Ah, yes. This one introduces us to John Scott Eccles,
Okay.
who seeks Holmes's help.
Uh-huh.
After this strange and unsettling experience at Wisteria Lodge,
Okay, what happened? Was there a murder?
there was. So Eccles describes this bizarre dinner party with this strange and erratic host, Mr. Aloysius Garcia.
Okay.
Garcia acted strangely all evening, speaking in riddles, behaving unsettlingly,
Okay.
and later that night, he was found dead in his study.
So it's like a locked room mystery,
Exactly.
but with like a really creepy vibe.
Yes.
What was the motive?
Well, Holmes, intrigued, travels to Wisteria Lodge, right?
Uh-huh.
And he delves into Garcia's past.
Yeah.
He uncovers a history of political intrigue and recent threats against Garcia's life,
Okay.
suggesting revenge is a possible motive.
Was he rare?
He was. Through careful observation interviews, Holmes unravels this, complex family history
Uh-huh.
filled with violence and betrayal,
Wow.
and discovers that Garcia's death was linked to this long-standing feud between two Spanish families.
Oh, wow.
And the killer was a descendant of Garcia's old enemy, seeking to avenge a past injustice.
So even like generations later, the sins of the fathers can return to haunt their descendants.
Yes, and I think this case highlights the enduring power of the past
Yeah.
and the complex web of relationships within families.
Now, let's talk about a case that involves a family that's been torn apart by greed and the search for a missing will. The Adventure of the Three Gables.
Ah, this one features Mary Maberly, a young woman who comes to Holmes after her mother's sudden death.
Okay.
And Mary believes her mother's death was suspicious
Okay.
and a valuable family will is missing.
Okay, so we've got a potential murder
Yeah.
and a missing will. Sounds like, the perfect ingredients for some serious family drama.
It is. So
Yeah.
Holmes sensed foul play right away.
Yeah.
He notices the three gables of Mary's house,
Mhm.
like a symbol of her family's history.
Right.
He learns that Mary's mother had a mysterious visitor claiming to be a distant relative.
A mysterious relative. I bet that's where the trouble started.
It is. Through his deductions, Holmes uncovers the truth. The visitor was actually Mary's half-brother, Douglas, who'd been raised in America, and was unaware of his true parentage. He had come to claim his rightful inheritance.
Oh, so the family secret was a hidden sibling.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
During a confrontation,
Yeah.
Douglas accidentally kills his mother while demanding the will.
Oh, no.
So Holmes exposes his secret, recovers the missing document, bringing a semblance of justice to this family, shattered by greed and deceit.
It's a reminder that family ties can be both strong and destructive. And sometimes, the pursuit of wealth can lead to just terrible consequences.
Indeed. Now, how about we dive into a case that takes us back into the world of sports with a missing rugby player? The Adventure of the Missing Three-Quarter.
Oh, yeah. What happened to the rugby player?
So Godfrey Staunton, this star rugby player, vanishes just days before a crucial match.
Okay.
And his teammate, Cyril Overton, fearing foul play, seeks Holmes's help.
Right. So we've got a missing athlete. Was he kidnapped? Did somebody want to sabotage the team?
Well, Holmes, as always, was very methodical in his approach, right? So he learns that Staunton had been acting strangely before he disappeared.
Okay.
Showing signs of anxiety and being very secretive.
Right.
And he discovers a telegram addressed to the Larches.
The Larches? What's that?
Well, it turned out to be a private asylum.
Oh.
And Holmes learns that Staunton had been visiting a woman there, claiming that she was his sister.
His sister. Was she ill?
She was, and that was the key to the mystery.
Okay.
The woman was not Staunton's sister, but his secret wife.
Oh, he was hiding a marriage. Why?
Well, because his wife was mentally ill.
Oh.
Staunton, ashamed and afraid of jeopardizing his reputation, had hidden her away and lied about their relationship. He eventually disappears, trying to escape, the pressures of this double life.
That's such a sad story. It must have been a terrible burden to carry.
It was. I think Holmes, understanding the complexity of Staunton's situation, chooses not to expose his secret. He allows Staunton to return to his team and play in the match, preserving his reputation and giving him a chance to reconcile with his wife.
That's a real testament to Holmes' compassion.
Yeah.
He recognized that, sometimes discretion is the better part of valor.
Yeah.
And protecting someone's well-being can be more important than revealing the truth.
Absolutely. And speaking of protecting someone's well-being, our next case takes us to the desolate moors of Dartmoor.
Yes.
Where this legendary beast and a family curse threaten the life of an heir. The Hound of the Baskervilles.
This is like one of the most famous Sherlock Holmes stories of all time.
It is.
I can practically hear the howling wind.
Right.
And see the fog rolling in across the moors.
It's a classic for a reason. It's full of atmosphere.
Yeah.
And suspense. So, Dr. Mortimer, a friend of the recently deceased Sir Charles Baskerville, seeks Holmes's help.
Okay.
He believes Sir Charles's heir, Sir Henry Baskerville, is in danger.
Danger from what?
From a legendary hound that haunts the Baskerville family.
Right, that spooky hound.
Right. So Mortimer describes, this spectral hound responsible for the deaths of several family members. Sir Charles's death, apparently from a heart attack, is shrouded in mystery, and paw prints of a gigantic hound were found nearby.
Spooky. So is the hound real?
That's the question Holmes sets out to answer.
Okay.
He and Watson travel to Baskerville Hall.
Yeah.
Encountering this strange and unsettling environment.
Yeah. I bet they meet some interesting characters while they're there.
They do. They encounter the enigmatic Stapleton.
Okay.
This naturalist living on the moor, and his beautiful sister, Beryl.
Okay.
They also run into, an escaped convict lurking about.
Okay. So we've got a spooky setting, a mysterious death, a legendary hound, and an escaped convict. This is getting good.
This is where the fog of mystery really thickens.
Okay.
So Holmes, meticulously investigates the moor, uncovering a web of secrets and deceptions. He discovers that Stapleton is actually a distant relative of the Baskervilles.
Okay.
Driven by greed and this lust for, the Baskerville fortune.
So it wasn't a ghost hound after all.
Well, not quite.
Okay.
Stapleton had created a hound.
Okay.
Using this large mastiff dog.
Right.
Painting it with phosphorus.
Oh, wow.
To give it a spectral glow.
Right.
And he was using this terrifying creature to frighten the Baskervilles.
Yeah.
Hoping that Sir Henry would succumb to the same fate as his uncle.
That's diabolical. Using fear and a local legend to, eliminate his rivals? Pretty cunning, if I'm being honest.
It is.
Yeah.
Very monstrous, but cunning.
Yeah.
But Holmes, of course, sees through the charade.
Yeah.
He exposes Stapleton, who flees into the treacherous Grimpen Mire, where he presumably meets a rather watery end.
Another win for Sherlock Holmes. It's a reminder that, even the most elaborate schemes can be unraveled with careful observation and a little bit of courage. Now, speaking of elaborate schemes, how about a case that involves a theft of national importance? I'm thinking of the adventure of the Bruce Partington plans.
Ah, yes. This one takes us into the world of espionage and national security.
Yes.
So, vital submarine plans, the Bruce Partington plans, have been stolen from the Admiralty.
Right.
threatening to plunge Britain into a crisis.
Mm.
And who better to call upon in such a dire situation than Sherlock Holmes?
Right. But it was actually his brother, Mycroft, right,
It
who
was.
got him involved in the case.
Yes, Mycroft, this high-ranking government official, recognizes, the gravity of the situation
Yeah.
and knew that Sherlock possessed these unique skills needed to recover the stolen plans.
So what did Holmes find at the, scene of the crime?
Well, he discovers this broken window
Okay.
and a trail of footprints leading to the railway tracks,
Okay.
suggesting that the thief had made a hasty escape. So he suspects a foreign spy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And begins investigating individuals with connections to enemy nations.
So was he right about the spy?
Well, there's a twist, as always.
Okay.
Through a combination of his deductive reasoning and a stroke of luck, he identifies the culprit, Cadogan West, a disgruntled government clerk who had been overlooked for a promotion.
So not a foreign spy after all, just a disgruntled employee.
Exactly. West, motivated by a desire for revenge and financial gain, planned to sell the plans to a foreign power. But Holmes, of course, intervenes, recovers the stolen documents, and averts this potentially disastrous security breach.
It's a reminder that sometimes the biggest threats can come from within, from those we least suspect. Now, for a case that involves a disappearance and a, globe-trotting investigation, let's talk about the disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax.
Ah, yes. This story introduces us to Lady Frances Carfax, a wealthy woman who vanishes without a trace while traveling in Switzerland.
And that's where Holmes and Watson enter the picture.
Exactly. So her friends and family are totally baffled by her disappearance.
Yeah.
And Holmes, intrigued by the lack of clues and the unusual circumstances, takes on the case.
So what was so unusual about it?
Well, Lady Frances was last seen with this, rather peculiar couple, Mr. and Mrs. Holy Peters.
Holy Peters, that's an unusual name. Did Holmes suspect them right away?
He did. He had this knack for recognizing suspicious characters.
Yes.
And something about the Holy Peters just seemed off.
Right. So where did the investigation lead them?
To Switzerland, of course.
Of course.
So Holmes and Watson follow Lady Frances's trail, uncovering the truth about the Holy Peters. They were notorious criminals who specialized in swindling wealthy individuals.
Ah, so they were con artists. What did they do to Lady Frances?
They drugged and kidnapped her,
Oh, wow.
planning to impersonate her and steal her fortune.
What a plan.
Right. It was a daring and audacious plan.
Yeah.
But Holmes, ever the resourceful detective, sees through their deception,
Good.
rescues Lady Frances from her captors,
Uh-huh.
and brings them to justice.
Another victory for good over evil. This case highlights that even when traveling abroad,
Yeah,
danger can lurk in unexpected places and appearances can be deceiving.
absolutely.
Okay, for a case that delves into, the world of high society scandals, how about the adventure of the illustrious client?
Ah, yes. This one features this, very influential but unnamed client, referred to only as the illustrious client,
Okay.
who asks Holmes for help
Uh-huh.
in a very delicate matter.
Okay. What did this illustrious client want?
Well, he wanted Holmes to protect this young woman, Violet de Merville,
Okay.
from this notorious womanizer,
Okay.
Baron Gruner.
Right.
So Gruner was this charming and wealthy aristocrat who had a long history of, preying on vulnerable women.
So, a classic predator.
Right.
So what did Holmes do? I mean, he couldn't exactly arrest him for being a charmer.
Right. But he knew he had to act quickly to protect Violet. So he devises this plan. Right.
Okay.
To expose Gruner's true nature and ruin his reputation in society.
How'd he do that? Did he, dig up dirt on his past?
He did. And he enlists the help of this rather intriguing character, Kitty Winter.
Okay, who's Kitty Winter?
Kitty was a former victim of Gruner's,
Oh.
a woman who sought revenge for the way he had wronged her. So she confronts Gruner, revealing his past crimes to the world.
Wow, so Holmes used Gruner's own past against him.
He did.
Wow.
So, the confrontation leads to this violent struggle,
Okay.
leaving Gruner disfigured.
Oh, wow.
So his carefully crafted image, the source of his power over women, was shattered,
Right.
effectively ending his reign of terror.
Wow, it's kind of poetic justice.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that sometimes the best way to fight evil is to expose it to the light of day, right? Bringing the truth to light can be the most powerful weapon of all. Now let's move on to a case that involves a missing clergyman, this strange inheritance scheme, and a really sinister secret. The Adventure of the Three Garridebs.
Ah, yes. This one features Nathan Garrideb, an elderly man who approaches Holmes with a rather peculiar tale.
Okay, what's the tale?
He's been contacted by a man claiming to be a distant relative,
Okay.
Howard Garrideb,
Okay.
who's searching for other Garridebs.
Why was this Howard guy searching for Garridebs?
Well, he claimed to be handling this large inheritance in America and promised a substantial sum to any Garrideb he could locate.
Okay, I can see how Nathan would be intrigued by that.
Right.
So is this Howard legitimate?
Well, that's what Holmes sets out to discover, so he accompanies Nathan to meet Howard, who, seems convincing at first.
Okay.
But Holmes, ever observant, notices, these inconsistencies in his story
Uh-huh.
and his behavior.
Okay.
Something's amiss.
What tipped him off? What did he notice?
Well, it was a combination of things. Howard's accent didn't match his claimed background,
Okay.
and he seemed overly eager to get Nathan alone.
Hmm.
So Holmes, suspecting a sinister motive, devises a plan to expose the truth.
Okay, and what was the truth?
Howard Garrideb was actually Killer Evans, a notorious criminal who had escaped from prison.
No way. So the whole inheritance scheme was a scam, but what was his goal? What was he trying to do?
Evans used the inheritance story to lure victims to secluded locations
Oh,
where he could rob and murder them.
that's terrifying. Good thing Holmes was there to stop him.
Indeed. So Holmes apprehends Evans,
Yeah.
brings this murderous scheme to an end.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to be wary of those who promise easy riches
Right.
and to trust our instincts,
Yeah.
when something just feels off.
Absolutely. Now, for our final case, let's delve into a story that blends the exotic with a touch of medical mystery. The Adventure of the Blanched Soldier.
Oh, okay. What's this one about?
Well, this one's unique because it's narrated by Dr. Watson himself.
Oh,
So he's approached by James Dodd,
okay.
this concerned friend of Godfrey Emsworth, who has vanished under these peculiar circumstances.
What was so peculiar about his disappearance?
He had recently returned from South Africa,
Yeah.
exhibiting these strange symptoms,
Like what?
including this aversion to sunlight.
Okay.
So Dodd, worried about his friend, seeks Watson's help.
Did Watson go to Holmes for advice?
He did. And Holmes, upon hearing the details, suspects that something more than a simple illness is at play.
Okay.
He learns that Emsworth had been involved in a diamond mining operation in South Africa
Okay.
and links his disappearance to the theft of a valuable diamond, the Star of Africa.
Intriguing. So we've got a missing man, a stolen diamond, and a possible illness. Sounds like there's a lot to unpack.
Right. It was. So Holmes, through these brilliant deductions, uncovers this multifaceted truth.
Okay, tell me, what's the truth?
Emsworth had contracted leprosy while in South Africa.
Oh.
So, fearing social isolation and prejudice, he went into hiding, explaining his strange behavior and aversion to daylight.
Right.
The stolen diamond, however, was a separate issue.
Oh, so the two mysteries were unrelated.
Yes. Holmes discovers that Emsworth's business partner, a man named Barker, had stolen the diamond
Okay.
and framed Emsworth to cover his tracks. So Holmes exposes Barker, recovers the diamond, and clears Emsworth's name.
Another triumph for Sherlock Holmes.
Right.
This case reminds us that sometimes the most perplexing situations have both simple and complex explanations. And it also highlights the importance of, separating fact from fiction
Yeah.
and not jumping to conclusions.
Absolutely. Now, for our final case, let's turn to a story narrated by Holmes himself.
Ooh, I like it when Holmes tells a story. We get to go right inside that brain of his.
Exactly. So, The Adventure of the Lion's Mane.
Okay, what's that one about?
It takes place in a seaside village where Holmes is investigating the death of Fitzroy McPherson, a schoolmaster found dead on the beach with these strange welts on his body.
Welts. It sounds like he was attacked.
That's what everyone assumed.
Yeah.
But the circumstances were really baffling. No witnesses, no obvious cause of death. Holmes, however, notices something crucial. A jellyfish.
A jellyfish. What does a jellyfish have to do with murder?
Well, Holmes, with his knowledge of marine life, recognizes the jellyfish as this particularly venomous species
Right.
called the lion's mane,
Okay.
and he deduces that McPherson had been stung while swimming,
Ah.
leading to his death.
So the killer was a creature,
Yes.
not a person. It's a reminder that sometimes nature itself can be the deadliest force of all.
Indeed. And it really showcases Holmes's ability to, consider all possibilities,
Yeah.
no matter how unusual they may seem.
And lastly, let's conclude our Sherlockian deep dive with a case that like really puts Holmes's reputation and intellect on the line.
Okay.
The Adventure of the Mazarin Stone. I think this involves a pretty daring heist.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
This time, the target is the famous Mazarin Stone, this priceless diamond on display in a London museum, and it vanishes,
Okay.
leaving the police totally bewildered.